This is a follow-up to a previous video I made, which was attempting to use the transactional analysis model of parent-adult-child with the internal family systems parts theory or model. And so please look at that video first, which I will link in the description box. And what I was wanting to add in right now is some thoughts about the complexities of these parts within us. And remember that they exist in both people in a relationship. So everything that I am talking about for the person on the right-hand side is also for the other person, but of course going to display differently. So this also is an attempt to bring in some aspects of polyvagal theory around arousal states and neurology, the connection between the brain and all of the organs and muscles in the body. So in a manager state, which I am calling the parent state in transactional analysis, managers can also be called fixed protectors, according to one author, but it would be when we are picking up on danger, whether it's physical or emotional or stress, and whether it's conscious or subconscious, and our arousal goes up, and first we experience freeze of the type that is in response to a novelty cue. So like a meerkat, we stop, we get quiet, we look around, we use all of our senses just to check and evaluate what the threat is. If that stays on, like the button is switched on and there's no way to turn it off, that's a panic attack. And it could also be referred to as failed inhibition. So arousal comes up and then it gets inhibited and comes back down and we relax. But if it isn't coming back down, that freeze state would be like a panic attack or a heightened baseline of anxiety, but more likely it's a panic attack. Then after the assessment of the danger or the threat, most of us will try to get away from it first. So flight is not only like booking it and running, but it's also avoidance and just sort of disconnection, anxiety, kind of like extra adrenaline, because if you can't leave, and a lot of times we will repress it, the body is still like, yeah, but we're ready to if we have to. If you can't get out of the perceived threat, then we turn to fight, which is basically get out of my face, get off my toes, don't kill me, I'm going to defend myself. If none of those work, and I am using a link I'll put in by Pete Walker, who is a therapist in California, who talks about the types that can become fixed into sort of personality types based on which of these you stay stuck in. But fawn, he suggests, is when you can't run away and you can't fight. So you become, I was going to say manipulative, but basically you become a caretaker. You make sure that your parent is happy, so that when they drink, they won't drink so much that they begin beating your brother, you know, or you make yourself focused on other people's comfort and safety so that they won't escalate or to avoid conflict. Now, the transactional analysis talks about the parent state a little differently. So just going to enlarge for a second here. If I can get this to move around. All right. So we either have a critical parent or a nurturing parent, and those are internal states similar to the manager, but a critical parent would monitor adherence to rules, shoulds and musts, and expectations of self and others, and is largely automatic. So Freud would maybe call that the superego of like, okay, I'm going to do what is expected in the culture to please people, but also to not get negative interactions or consequences. The inner parent that's nurturing is a voice of unconditional acceptance, hope, and optimism, and the source of self-soothing and self-recognition. So this would be the introjected loving parent. More likely, we have an introjected critical parent, which means however our parents actually treated us, we absorb it and sort of repeat their voices in our head as if they're our own now. So the nurturing parent from transactional analysis would actually be a little bit closer to self-energy from internal family systems. And that's with these adjectives that start with C. When you're able to access calm, clarity, courage, creativity, compassion, confidence, feeling connected, and curious. Okay, so back to the 4Fs and Pete Walker. So he suggests that the freeze type, if you end up in freeze a lot, is connected to dissociative disorders. So freeze in this material is sometimes referring to two different things. So freeze, as I described it up to now, is when you are on alert. And freeze can also refer to when that finally ends and you collapse. You shut down, kind of play dead like the possum. It's also referred to as flag, fold, faint, or I like to say fog because your brain gets foggy. And in internal family systems, it's referred to as the firefighters, or some people say the freeze protectors. So Walker says then that the flight types become obsessive compulsive potentially. You know, I'll do anything to get away from risk or a obsessive thought in my head about risk. And so that anything becomes a compulsive behavior that's often uncomfortable or inconvenient. So that's the flight type. A fight type who ends up overly going into fight as their response is considered a narcissistic defense. And so imagine that a couple is having a disagreement and the person who is going into fight, when we're in lizard brain in fight or flight, the limbic system shuts off the frontal cortex. The frontal cortex would be where we remember the context. So I should probably put that on this diagram, that self-energy as well as where we remember the context, meaning I remember the relationship. I know that I'm married to you. You're my best friend. I love you is only something that we access when we are calm and have the social safety network engaged. So if we are in the fight reaction, it's by sort of definition narcissistic because we're out for number one. You wronged me. You're not doing what I want you to. You're falsely accusing me. You suck. I'm not backing down. In fact, I need you to knock it off. So the other dynamic could be that one person's afraid of abandonment and the other person's afraid of engulfment. And the person who is begging to not be abandoned is actually pushing on the engulfment button in the other person, and the fight could be an attempt to like get the person to stop. So if you resort most often to the fawn type, then that would be considered codependency. It's an adaptation to chaos and trauma that is informed by let's take care of others so that they won't hurt me, so they won't explode, so there won't be conflict. And even codependency in childhood is, I'm going to take care of my parent so they will actually be in the state where they're able to take care of me, or at least not hurt me. Then there are combinations. So fawn plus freeze is when you surrender to a threat by taking on a victim role. So you're panicked and you don't know what to do, so you bounce into fawn, which is basically whatever you say. I'll do whatever you say because I want this to stop, and I want. So it's potentially a reaction to a fight type, and it's an adaptation. All of these are adaptations. So fawn flight is a person who is escaping, I'm sorry, that comes later in flight freeze. So fawn flight is taking care of everything, avoiding threat by becoming invaluable. So like the flight would be in this case wanting to, you really want to get out of Dodge, but you sort of can't. So it's like a Energizer Bunny fawn. And so that could be the hero child, the overachiever, the perfectionist. And I didn't say that with fawn freeze, it could also be underachieving and procrastination, where you are kind of mobilized or immobilized and don't want to get anyone's disapproval. So don't do anything, and you won't get any. You might not get the criticism from a critical parent, including your own internal critical parent. So it's a push it off till later. Fawn fight is where you are using controlling threats in coercive and manipulative ways. So I put covert narcissism, but it also could be gaslighting. It could be the part of narcissism that is incredibly charming at the beginning. So using the fawn skills from sort of innocuous codependency to manipulative antisocial codependency in a way, or people understanding psychology for your benefit. Flight freeze is the avoidance that I was mistakenly starting to talk about earlier, by focusing on other situations. So it's escaping into video games, or it could be projects, or even workaholism possibly, as long as it's more solitary. It's, getting stuck down into this kind of not interpersonal interaction that avoids risks, threats, conflict, all that stuff. Okay, one last part is about the child state, which I was correlating with the exiles in internal family systems. And that could also be referred to as your repressed wounds. It's times you were abandoned and fear of abandonment. It's shame, it's guilt, rejection, ridicule, abuse, neglect, isolation, feeling alone, disconnected, traumatic memories, and legacy burdens. A legacy burden is something that you carry from your parents, grandparents, other ancestors, your culture, your ethnicity. From the transactional analysis, they talk about the adaptive child versus the free child. And that would be the adaptive child is the part of the self that makes emotional decisions about self and the world based on past and present drivers, injunctions, biology, and environment. It's the, when we're an emotion mind from a DBT kind of perspective. The free child might actually kind of have a little bit of self energy. It's the spontaneous, emotive, creative, and in the moment part of self, sort of your true spirit, what you were meant to be, what you can find at times when you feel safe. It also could be what's referred to as regression in the service of the ego. And remember, the firefighter state is kind of like a teen, which isn't part of transactional analysis, but it's when we escape into addictions, suicidal ideation, and self-harm. And that's why the flight freeze is kind of into addictions. Anyway, those were my thoughts about the polyvagal system, internal family systems, and transactional analysis. Thank you for listening.